Okay, looks like we are live. Need to refresh the feed. Let me try zooming this out just a hair. Wrong way. Did that work out? All right. So, investing in my own education. Definitely something that I have done a lot relative to what I think is typical in the financial field. A lot of the advice you get out there saying, hey, you can just go into the field, you'll do great. As long as you do a good job, then yeah, you'll get promotions, life will go pretty smoothly. And honestly, that's what I thought at first. That's part of the reason why I graduated college and just went, hey, I don't need graduate school. And I had started the CFA program because I had gotten interested in learning more, but I really didn't see myself getting anything beyond a CFA. And the CFA was mostly just to learn stuff, not for any sort of career progression. But as I got further into the field, it became quite obvious that yes, if you have the right connections, then it is possible to go in, just do a good job, know the right people, get a promotion, transfer jobs every 2 to 3 years, and you can work your way up the chain. This is not necessarily the case if one, you graduate during one of an economic recession. Trying to find a job in 2020 was not fun. Or two, if you end up being in a position where you don't know people in the field before you get better jobs, it makes it so it's really harder to transition. And sometimes you're in environments where what you think is doing a good job isn't what your manager thinks, and you have to do what they think. But then it's like if you're doing things like changing your perspective just to match theirs, or you're giving up your own morals or things in the process in order to meet expectations, it can be quite frustrating. That's at least some of how I felt throughout the process. And what I did see is that while education is not some magical bullet that's going to take you from making 50 grand a year to 200 grand a year, it is a helpful 10 or 20% that can help get you there. So sometimes if you stack one or two of those, it can make the difference when you're still doing the getting work experience, going to the right places, trying to switch it up every, 2, 3, 4 years. That can help a lot. But I think we should take a step back and talk a little bit about why I initially got interested in finance and economics in the first place. So I've talked a little bit about this before, but I originally, one, had read some of the stuff from Warren Buffett. The original idea to even read any of this came from, I had been talking in high school with my parents about what exactly do I want to do with my career. And, I had been really good at math. I was good at understanding people, but I wasn't very good at articulating things. So initially I thought of things like engineering or coding, which I did learn some of, but finance was an area where I felt like people skills as well as math really paired up together. So once I had started looking into it a little bit more, reading some books on some of the greats in the field, it was Warren Buffett. I read some stuff from Peter Lynch, who was a guy who ran one of the funds at Fidelity in the 1980s that did absolutely fantastically for a very long period. If there was ever a guy who was to say, beating the market is possible over an extended period of time, I would give kudos to him. But with all that being said, what really popped out to me was that you could take some sort of drive or some sort of desire to get better at something, and you can just go for it and you could actually get something out of it, meaning hard work actually got you somewhere. Reputation actually meant something. Then I started watching things like The Wolf of Wall Street, seeing more of the investment banking world, and they make it seem really cool from the outset, like you're just not worthy yet of all of it, but if you just work 100 hours a week, then maybe you will be. And I don't know. I didn't find that to be true later. Connections make a big difference in just kissing the right ass, but nonetheless, it did spark a lot of interest. It's like you took some stuff, a really cool lifestyle, You had the possibility of working hard and being smart and outdoing other people, actually meaning something, that kind of sense of competition, which I had been missing because I got basically permanently injured with rheumatoid arthritis when I was playing soccer in high school. Couldn't do that anymore. Tried esports, similar problems with my hands, couldn't do that anymore. So looking for a career where I had some sort of outlet for that made a huge difference for me in what I wanted to do. Now, part of the issue with how I started getting more interested in it is like when you start reading stuff about investing, there is so much crap about get rich quick or it's so easy, all you have to do is this, that it's hard to sift through and find what like really matters. And it usually takes a few years of reading, talking to people, going to events. School really helps with exposure to like those type of things before you really get a good feel for like who's full of shit, what things they're saying actually like help, because within every good lie there's usually some truth. So for instance, a lot of people when they want to sell courses, they will tell you that it's all just about hard work, you need to put the output, and if you can do that and continue to improve and just follow their instructions, everything will just magically work out. While that is nice, doesn't always really work out that way. Well, trying to line up the thing for Instagram, wild times. Anyway, so part of the reason that this ended up bothering me so much is like I was trying to learn. I didn't have people in the field who knew things better than me that could tell me about things. Like obviously there's a fair amount of some sort of scamming out there, but like it can be tough trying to figure out. So yeah. Anyway, now as I started going through school, part of what happened was I started getting a little bit more knowledge of things like accounting, how to evaluate businesses, where exactly effort might actually be rewarded, and when you are working in the field, who exactly are you helping? When I wanted to go into investment banking or private equity, or it's like you can make a lot of money doing that. But a lot of times, if you're in that side of things, you're going to be stuck with just making the guy above you a bunch of money or just the firm a bunch of money. There's not necessarily a lot of helping things. There's a lot of damage that can actually be done in the process. Versus when I heard someone talk about wealth management, it made me a lot more interested in potentially going out there and helping individuals, even if they were wealthy. It's like I at least felt like I could make some sort of difference for someone. And like my idea on things has always been that if someone wants something out of life and I have some way to actually help them, that's what I would like to be able to do, is like help people who want to help themselves. And I think money is one of the most powerful tools to be able to do that. Ultimately, that can be kind of difficult though. When someone already has what they want, it's like, is that really doing as much as you wanted it to be? It's arguable. But once I started kind of piecing that ideal together, it made me want to go more towards wealth management route, which still there was a thought of, okay, you need some education, but you don't need the world's most. It's more of like a salesy type thing. You just need to be good at networking, and it's like, okay, I can learn those type of skills. Went to Toastmasters, was very active on campus, started being a tour guide, and I felt like I was learning a lot better soft skills. I'd even done a summer doing door-to-door sales. I mean, you pick up a lot of things if you just practice enough. Made a whole bunch of YouTube videos on things like Pokemon or things I was interested in at the time. And even once I had kind of gotten into the field and eventually finished up my CFA level 2 was actually what got me my first advising job past like just your entry level, like, hey, you're answering phone calls, I need help with my password. Like, I got that straight out of school, but getting my CFA level 2 is what let me be an advisor over at Morgan Stanley. And then after that, I finished my level 3, and it was like finding a job was just like, there's almost like this jump that needed to happen that just couldn't. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm going to go get my MBA, I'm going to go get my CFP, glass ceiling, and just... Sometimes when they say glass ceiling, they mean that more for women or minorities like progressing in the system. But honestly, I mean, the analogy kind of works pretty similarly. If you don't have any connections and you don't have any like major education, it can be a similar problem. But the stacking of things, I mean, I don't even know if it would have helped that much job wise, because in wealth management in specific, it's like either go into management or you end up in a place where you just go off on your own. I mean, it so far seemed to help with going off on my own, just in terms of knowledge wise. Um, as far as like getting all that education, how that shaped my approach to wealth management. I originally had been fairly big on active management, meaning when you read about someone like Warren Buffett, he's very good at picking a handful of stocks. These outperform way over time using something called value investing, where it's basically the company's assets are way underpriced and some of the intangibles, meaning things like brand name, are way undervalued as well. And you just hold a bunch of cash, you wait for the right time to buy, you buy into the right time, and then watch it grow over time. I loved the idea of this. I mean, this seemed like conceptually wonderful. With the advent of AI as well as algorithms in trading, which have been around in finance for significantly longer than they have been to the public, have been so dominant at technical analysis of picking up on every little bit of information that comes out that it makes it so value investing has underperformed for a long time on average. And when I've tried to do things myself, it was basically the realization of like, even if I could beat the market by 0.5% or 1% or something in the long run, it was like, one, you'll spend all day reading really boring materials. Two, the probability of not being able to do it year after year is high. And three, you can't interact and help people while doing that. Like, you have to be the guy who sits at your computer with your 3 monitors, maybe even 6, like, all day. And you need to work with other people who are doing that as well. I actually had an internship doing that exact type of thing, and it was just, that can be tough. Whereas you look at how dominant the research around passive investing into asset level stuff, where you're looking at stocks, bonds, cash, real estate, like how much better that's performed if you just get lower fees compared to other things that's charging 1%. It's like, oh, you can't hear my voice? The heck? That's weird. 1 second. Thank you for the reminder. That's so weird. Why is it doing that? Testing. 1, 2, 3. That's so weird. It's working on my side, meaning like when I put on headphones and I actually listen to it, I can hear it. It might be something on your end. 1, 2, 3. Sorry about that. Let me know if you have any other questions, but thank you for stopping in. Kind of getting back to what I was talking about, as far as like shaping my approach to wealth management, I guess I've been a lot more on the passive side of things, of like, how do you take advantage of things like taxes, leverage, like there are things that do better consistently versus stock picking, which originally was like the reason I had gotten into investing in the first place, which it feels kind of ironic, but I mean, whatever works well, and I'd rather do what's most consistent, because ultimately that's like helping people helps. Sure. What's the gift? Okay, so next thing I wanted to go over is what motivated you to go beyond formal education and pursue certifications like the CFP and CFA. I think I kind of went over that, which Next thing I wanted to go over is for me the most challenging part of like the CFA and CFP designations was just the hours. Meaning when I originally did the CFA level one, just getting used to studying 2 to 3 hours a day was a lot for me because going to business school and being relatively smart, it's pretty easy. No, I am streaming. Um, I guess I didn't have to try that hard in college, I guess is a way of putting it. So, with the CFA and CFP, having to actually try quite a bit where it's just a matter of memorization, like, it can be tough. I guess I didn't have to try that hard in college, I guess is a way of putting it. So, this is interesting trying to get used to, like, speaking and typing and all that at the same time. Not used to such a thing. Um, so beyond just like the number of hours put in to get used to the CFA and CFP program, I mean, there was a lot in terms of like trying to like get a vast amount of material down to very simple things. So beyond just like the number of hours put in to get used and basically synthesize it in a way where it's like you only understand it down to like a few pages and you can answer question after question after question that way. Some of it you pick up passively just from reading over and over again. Some of it's just memorization of doing questions over and over again. But like the idea that you're basically taking like vast amounts of knowledge and trying to actually take away the parts that are most helpful, but also having gotten the perspective like why they're helpful. That helped me a lot. But it was a lot to get used to. And I think when I got to level 2, working out, like working full time, I was trying to do some YouTube content, had a girlfriend at the time, had just gotten a puppy, and was studying 5 hours a day like that. That killed me. But it was a lot to get used to, and I think when I got Thank you very much. By the time I got to level 3, the thing that was hard is like when you've been doing it year after year after year of like the hours over and over again, like you get breaks between the tests, but like it's still it can get to you. Meaning you spend too much time going through it over and over and over again. It's like I had a point where it's like I was studying 3 hours a day. I got very used to it, felt very comfortable with it, but life was just not enjoyable at the time. It'd be like wake up, study, try to finish as much studying at work as you can, get off of work, finish off whatever you have left, go work out, go to bed. That was it. Because like even if I had time to do other things, I was so tired I didn't want to do anything else. I mean, I was always trying to do some other things. I remember I was trying to buy a rental property while I was doing level 3. That was a nightmare. Really. I remember one night I was studying in the morning, finish it up during work, get off of work right thing around like 5 or 6 or something like that, and then basically spend the rest of the evening just like painting ceilings. And when the ceilings are 15 foot tall and you're using like this big roller stick to do it, it's like can really be something else, that is for sure. Now if I could go back and take like the same educational path, do I feel like I would do it the exact same? Probably not. I'd like to have all the education, and I think all the reading I've done on my own time has made a massive difference towards learning things, as well as watching like lots of videos online. If you figure out who aren't just grifters, there's actually some pretty good info on YouTube. But definitely could have done it way more efficiently if someone had told me what in the heck I was supposed to be doing. Like, it's just difficult when you're trying to stumble your way through. And sometimes, like, failing your way to victory is one of the best paths if you don't know what you're doing, but, man, living through it could be a whole nother story. Okay, so next question I have on here is, how valuable was your undergraduate education in finance and economics and real-world applications? The finance side, I think, helped to some degree, just understanding what the most important models are, where they came from, and the history of why, how they were used. Like, that helped quite a bit. I learned more, I think, reading and through the CFA program than I did from just my finance degree, but the finance degree alone would have helped to some degree. My econ degree, though, like in economics, that I think made a much bigger difference. The understanding of how to think about the world makes a huge difference in economics because you look at it from a utility perspective, meaning you understand how to take math and apply it to the real world very well. One, it makes you understand how a bunch of very powerful people make their decisions, but two, as well, it makes it so you have a much better understanding of how to think about things without your emotions, so that once you look at it that way, you can then look at your emotions as well and go, okay, how are these interacting with each other, but also how can I make the most consistent decision here? I think a very good example of this is understanding multivariate regression, which is basically just like how do a bunch of little coefficients of like, for example, with like gross domestic product, you have things like how is unemployment affected, inflation, trade balance, like the stock market, like just take a bunch of factors, throw them at it, and like how does it correlate? Understanding how that works and how that basically drives most of the math in the world and what computers are doing is such a game changer for understanding like under the hood what is happening with technology, that it makes it so much easier to like one, not be scared of it, but two, as well, like make better decisions in the long term, which is like huge. So overall, I definitely feel like undergrad degree did help quite a bit and made a lot of the other materials, like doing my CFA level 1 while I was taking my 400 level classes in finance, it made it much easier. Now, was getting a master's degree worth it? In terms of an education perspective, definitely not. I don't feel like I learned much anything. But on the other hand, like on paper, I think down the road, if I'm in a position where I'd like to be running a business, not just like a solo financial advisor, having an MBA can make a difference as far as people feel more comfortable with someone in a management position who has a management degree. I mean, there is something about doing the things that on paper give you credibility. It is it necessary all the time? No. Do I think that it's kind of silly? Yes. But am I also realistic to the real world where sometimes just having your silly little letters helps in specific fields? Yes. Let's see, which email did we get this time? Okay. So with that, if I was to go back and decide like whether I would get a master's degree again or not, I probably still would. And whether I had a job in the field or whether I'm like out on my own, I do think it's worth it either way. Especially because I was able to work full time. Like if you have to take time off to get your master's degree, it's definitely more of like a weighing the decision, and it really depends on like the quality of your program. If you're looking to like get a job or something from it right out of school, for me, like going to ASU, which has a pretty good like in-person reputation, like top, I think like 30 or 40 program or something in the world. Even though I got to do it online, it still looks the same. And for other people, it's like if you go to like a Wharton or a Harvard or a Princeton, like yeah, that's just gonna be worth the time and the money. It just is. The connections and just how it looks on paper makes a big difference for some people. And even if that's only 10 to 20% of the people you talk to, sometimes that's the difference maker. I feel like people don't talk enough about the fact that like there are only so many things in the world that are like a very close to guarantee of like I know if I do this thing, I have more leverage. That's why I've liked education as much as I have. Like the fact that it's like you know it will work to some degree. Figuring out the financial side is huge, but I mean it's just kind of part of how it goes. How do you think your education compares to learning on the job? If you took all of it, like the CFA, the CFP, and the MBA, combined it all together, and all the reading I've done on my own time, that education is worth like 10 times what I have learned on the job. That was the one thing that like killed me is like during school they're like you're going to learn all of this on the job, and then you get into the field and you're like You try and ask questions, they're like, yeah, ask questions. And then they like, people get sick of you asking questions after about a week or two. Especially if they're in depth. And sometimes when you're asking in depth questions, you get answers that you don't want. Meaning, why do we do this? Why do we do this? And it's like you get the politically corporate correct answer that is not the true answer, and sometimes this makes you want to butt heads. For example, why are we selling this product if this product is obviously not doing well? To make the company money. But you can't just say that. It's like, oh, well, here's these fundamentals and principles that back up the fact that this is great over a long period, and like, that's just not true. And it just drove me nuts. Like, if someone would just tell me the truth, it would have been fine. But and as far as like actual like modeling, that I feel like on the job definitely helped a lot. That was very helpful. I do think that like in terms of investing principles though, and like fundamentals of finance is something you kind of have to pick up on your own through education or reading. There's not a lot of great books on that, is where formal education makes a bigger difference. Do you believe everyone in finance needs formal education, or can experience and self-study be enough? So if you only count formal education as like a college degree, I don't think that's necessary at all. Like if you were to look at something like the CFA program or the CFP program, or even like your Series 7 or things like that, that is more than sufficient for learning in-depth finance. Now, if you were to count the CFA and CFP as like formal education, and you were just going to go online, read IRS publications, maybe take a few courses that are like free, try and learn some YouTube videos and like read some books, could you get a basic concept of like how to invest fairly decently and not lose your shirt in the process? Probably. But would you understand the fundamentals of modeling and the why certain things work as well as they do in the long term, not just at a conceptual level, but like what's happening with all the charts and graphs? I think you would be missing something there. Knowing where everything comes from, I think, makes a big difference for not repeating mistakes that other people have made. And a lot of investing is more of a defensive game of just not losing money because something looks shiny and cool. Like, how do you make consistently good decisions? You know how to spot bad ones. It's more about saying no to 99 things and saying yes to the one really good thing than it is about saying yes to, like, the, oh my gosh, perfect thing. So, what do you think universities should teach that they don't? One, I do think that people should learn a lot more coding in this field. Just understanding how AI works is part of that, and just understanding how computers work. Meaning, what is the model that you're putting into eMoney or Money Guide Pro actually doing? Makes it so you know how to use it way better and can actually help people a lot better. So, that's one thing. Oh, more notifications. Second thing as well. Going through and actually updating marketing materials. I remember during my MBA, we were reading a book and it was talking about the Internet of Things and Web 3.0. Mind you, this was like 8 or 9 months ago. And this is a book like 2016. And I'm like, how do you have an entire marketing book and not talk about social media in this day and age at all? When that's like so much of where the world has gone at this point. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Another big part of it is like, I think the actual like modeling and things is good, but I think talking more conceptual level about like real estate throughout a finance degree would have been good. I mean, it's such an important part of things. I think crypto in a similar vein, like just understanding the fundamentals of it makes a huge difference, and I feel like that really just wasn't covered that much. Like there's some one-off classes, but making it more core material I think would help a lot. What was the biggest misconception you had before taking your licensing exams? So, I think for me, the people trying to do good for other people. Um, I, so I feel like a lot of times, like, I viewed things more from like a good and bad lens. Like, there were some people that were trying to do good for other people, and there were some people that were trying to do bad for other people and just take their money. When in reality, like, a lot of times, one, people don't even 100% really realize, like, some of the issues of what they're selling, which sometimes, again, comes back to the education side. And two, even if someone does kind of not feel 100% wonderful about it, a lot of times, like, they still have inherently, like, good ideas in mind. Let's take this, for example. There's an S&P 500 ETF that has just the stock market return. You have to pay very minimal fee on it. Or you could get a actively managed mutual fund, which is supposed to outpace the stock market, but on average gets about the same as the stock market because it has 300 of the 500 stocks in there and charges 10 times as much to do it. But it's still only like 0.5% of a fee. So, is this inherently wrong? No. But could a person feel kind of weird about it? Yes. Take this a step further. If you're working somewhere, there's a trading fee versus somewhere where you know there isn't a trading fee. This makes the company money. There's nothing wrong with businesses making money. That they have to make money in order to exist. They have to make the money somewhere. Being honest about where they make it can be good. But if you know you can do a client a better service somewhere else when your job is to make them money, it's like, can it make you feel weird? Yes. Is it inherently evil? No. There's so much of that like gray zone balance stuff in this field that it can drive you nuts. One thing I don't think gets talked about enough is like the impact of spending like hours reading on your own time and like what to read. There are so many just close to useless books out there that just don't do anything. Which is wild, but there are some books out there that are so good that like it like changes your life, at least for that like period in life. And I think for me, like, learning that sometimes you have to read 10 or 20 books of just ugh before you get to like the this is the good stuff is such an important lesson in trying to like have self-education that it can be difficult. And honestly, accepting the fact that a lot of self-help, investing, biographies, like the stuff where you're trying to learn stuff, you can skim through a lot of stuff. Especially if you've already read a lot. Like, it's one thing if you're 15 years old and you're just starting to read some of this stuff. It's another thing if, you've been doing it for a decade or two and you already know 90% of what's in the book. And, like, obviously, this can be taken to extremes, but for me, one personal example. Recently, I've been going through kind of like one finance book after another, some of them on communication, some of them more just like specific to financial advisors. And a lot of times, like, I will get through an entire book and not learn anything, even though I know the book would be perfectly good for someone if they didn't already know what was in the book. But I had one where, like, I read the first 8 chapters, didn't learn much of anything. Then I got to about 3 chapters worth that were, like, just pure gold. Like, just fantastic. Like, 50 pages of just, like, I would pay hundreds of dollars for this little excerpt. And then the rest of the book was pretty much garbage. And then, again, one book after another has not been very helpful since. And just being perfectly okay with that, I think, is huge. And other times, I mean, you'll read 5 fantastic books back to back, and you'll be like, wow, I want to never stop reading. And then you read 5 stinkers, and you're like, wow, why am I reading? Why? Especially when you have other things you could be doing, or when your schedule's tight, or like, yeah. Like me personally, nowadays, it's like I look at every, 20, 30 minutes I could be reading. I could spend 20 to 30 minutes interacting on social media, trying to talk to somebody, marketing to some way, or like just having my laundry done, or like something else functional. And it's like trying to find the balance and all that can be difficult, especially if you're the type of person who's already fairly aggressive about like how you fill your schedule and such. So definitely something to take consideration. What advice do you have for someone considering financial industry licensing? So when I say that, what I mean is like your Securities Industrials Essentials exam, Series 7, maybe your Series 6, and maybe like a 63 or 66. These are kind of like what get you your initial job in wealth management, or sometimes other parts of the field as well. When I say field, I mean just finance in general. Generally speaking, I think that number of practice questions done and number of exams done is such a correlation with success that it's obnoxious. And I mean, it drills it into your head pretty well. And like, there are a bunch of rules that you have to learn that you're just gonna have to end up looking up later. But even like knowing that the rule exists and having a vague recollection of it is significantly more helpful than people give it credit for. Meaning, knowing roughly what the laws are, even if you don't remember like the very specific niche little details, like it does make a difference. So definitely recommend like go through it, try and learn it, mash the questions, you'll be fine. Most of those tests aren't like crazy hard, they're just memorization. And there is some stuff about the math around things like options contracts and such, but it's amazing like how options contracts are so helpful for like international companies, but like to a normal like investor, there's so few situations where it comes up that like it's very easy to forget the importance of where they belong. That's part of why I enjoy like making some of this content, is like being able to talk about some of those more niche subjects like can be interesting. Trying to model some of those things can be different. Like trying to like you can do like a Black-Scholes or something like that, but like or your little like binomial tree or but there's a lot of things that don't translate to modeling perfectly, and you having to just use your noggin while having the vague recollection from the modeling happens. Kind of talking in circles here, but okay, next question. How do you decide which books to read in your free time for education? So, I usually will have something top of mind that I'm trying to learn at a time. For example, right now I've been trying to learn a lot better on communication in meetings and while speaking on camera. So, I went out, got like 10 different books on communication, things like script writing, being able to connect with people, common mistakes, and as well, few books on just like how to run a financial services firm. Having the books be specific to what you are trying to learn can be very, very helpful if you have a specific problem you are trying to solve. That part I think is fairly obvious. Sometimes it's harder to find those books and you have to spend a couple hours researching, but once you have like an idea of them, it can be helpful. I will say it does get expensive trying to get like the best stuff. For example, I wanted to learn taxes a lot better, and like I'm looking on there and it's like, what's the best material? Up-to-date textbooks that cost $300 a piece. Like, yeah, that's not gonna work at the moment. So what do I do instead? You start looking through things like YouTube, Google, Reddit to see if free stuff exists, and sometimes it is. Like for me, I found a lot of YouTube content from some accountants that was great. But as far as like the books, it even when you find stuff that's really good, if it starts going from I can buy it used for $6 versus I have to buy it brand new for 25, like it adds up. But sometimes the investment in yourself for those things, especially if you don't rip through one book right after another, can be quite helpful. Now, if you don't have like good fundamentals, meaning like if you've not read at least like 50 to 100 books, like just about a general subject area that you're interested in, yeah, I would just start buying a whole bunch of stuff from like top 50 finance books ever, top 50 business books ever. Like, pick what generally has good reviews. It's just like, it helps get your fundamentals so much better if like you have a basis of understanding like why are people saying what they're saying, what are they even saying, where does this come from, like understanding that like the amount of stuff that goes back to The Intelligent Investor with Benjamin Graham, like, yeah, you probably should have read that if you work in this field. That's just part of how it is. You know, like, once you have those fundamentals and you're reading through things and you can skim through them a lot more, it's like getting things that are much more specific about what you're trying to learn at the time, yes, becomes much more essential, because if you buy general stuff, you don't learn anything. Sometimes you will, but... Oh, another thing that's happened to me. When you read a lot in a certain subject, or you don't have something you're trying to learn about much anymore, like, for example, you have 10 skills you want to work on. It's going to take you 6 months to work on them. You know exactly what you want to work on. You just need time and some real life experience. Then, sometimes continuing to read, but just trying to find some different perspectives and learn what you don't know, like just trying to figure out what you need to learn in the future, can still be helpful. It's not as helpful, but every time I've thought I don't need to read anymore, I've always kind of... By the time I start going back into it to read a few books, I end up uncovering something, and I'm like, wow, this is gold. So just something to keep in mind. Like, trying to get different perspective can sometimes, like, just shift things at the right moment. You don't have to be absolutely on top of it all the time. Life kind of comes in waves. Top 3 books that have shaped your financial philosophy. I forget which Warren Buffett biography I read first, but that's definitely like up there. 2, Think and Grow Rich, I think was by Napoleon Hill. Basically just the whole idea of like, you can be happy and successful, and you can help other people be that way too. Like it's a lot in my brain. I think at the beginning, for me, like, I read some stuff from Tony Robbins at the time that, like, it was very simple, and I think that helped a lot. Like, the fact that investing can be so simple if you look at it the right way. Now, to be fair, another case of, like, just because the information's good in some parts doesn't mean I agree with everything a person says or everything going on there. Alright, how do you stay updated on financial trends and market shifts? I try to read the Wall Street Journal every day, even if I just skim it, but I will try to look through articles if need be. I just watch a lot of videos in my free time as well. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just pops up on my YouTube feed, and because I'm so active on social media, it's like I end up learning a lot of things just being around. 2, having friends or family that talk about these things fairly regularly does help as well. Like, a lot of the people I know are just interested in politics, even though I'm quite impartial. But when other people have strong opinions, it lets you understand both the left and right, which is nice. As far as, like, financial trends, I do think when you spend some time going to, like, financial events, reading what's most up to date on things, and, like, keeping up with, like, the CFA or CFP, like, you end up understanding what other people are thinking, which is frequently, like, the wrong thing, but it lets you keep up with what's going on, which is helpful. Like, for example, right now, every speech I've heard has been either pro-value investing, pro-international stocks, and, like, even though they will sit there and recognize it's been underperforming for 20 years, and you're like, if you're wrong enough times, you can be right eventually. Just because there's so much fear around stuff that's happening with the tariffs and international policy. The amount of times people have thought it's been the downfall of America, and then it's been fine the next year is wild. How do you balance running a business with continuing education? So obviously there can be quite a few hours that go into starting your own business, and this can be the same for almost any part of, like, a financial career, but for me, it's like you literally just write it on your to-do list and you're going to do it. Like, making something a necessity instead of optional makes a big difference, and there are so many ways you can fit it in if you absolutely want to fit it in. I think audiobooks are like the ultimate little hack for that if you've not already read pretty much everything available in audiobook form that you actually want to read. I ran into that problem eventually without paying, $30 for an audiobook. They have a Libby, which is like an audio book, like free library access, tons of books on there. But once you've gone through a lot of their best stuff, you have to wait months to get something, or it's like you can't listen to anything you actually want to listen to. And then there's Audible, but Audible can get expensive if you're actually like a mass listener. So some of it depends on your financial position, some of it depends on what you're most interested in, but ultimately, like, forcing it into your schedule in one way or another, like maybe you're reading a few pages on the toilet, on the way to work, while you're eating, like, it's just gonna have to be that way. If you want something to happen, you just kind of have to make it happen at some points. Have you ever regretted an educational investment? Honestly, not really. I think there's been plenty of times where I've bought a lot of books and then looked at my bank account and been like, and even sometimes I've bought like 8 or 10 books or whatever and then gone, yeah, that was not a great pack. But other times it's like I've bought in a pack and then thought to myself, wow, that was way more helpful than I thought it would be. And like the balancing out of those things has helped a lot. How do you measure the return on investment of your education? This is one thing I think I've seen a lot of people talk about as far as like college. Like, you could go be a plumber, be your own boss, and be a millionaire because you started at 18 and you just started stuffing your Roth IRA and 401k, which isn't wrong. I mean, it doesn't have to be. But part of what to consider with that, measuring the return on investment, like timeline, I think is the biggest thing. Like, it's not that hard to basically look at like, here's my income, here's how much my income will go up with this other job, here's how my income's been going up over time. But so it's time horizon and opportunity cost. Let's talk about time horizon first. So if you're going to go get a job, like higher income from college, meaning you go be an engineer and you're making 70 to 80K right out of school, that's something where like getting to that income so quickly makes a huge difference. So the return on investment there, a lot easier to measure something doing pretty well. Whereas like, let's say for example you get a marketing degree and it takes you 10 years to get to making 80 grand a year, because you lost the compounding available from early in your career, and you even went to school, which took up more time, then all of a sudden, like, yeah, I mean, the return on investment's way worse. Like, you need to incorporate opportunity cost in both your investments, but two, as well, like, number of years worked. So, like, having worked from 18 to 22, which gets you the higher potential job sooner, and you get more investing compounding returns, like, it can be hard to measure, but those are numbers you can kind of put together if you know what you would have been doing otherwise. Here's the tricky part with the opportunity cost side again. If you say you were going to go get like a trade school job or like something that actually pays, great. As long as you can like keep it up, physically speaking. Like me personally, I can't. Rheumatoid arthritis, I can't do physical jobs. But like a lot of people, like when they're making the argument of school not being worth the return on investment, like they're making things under the most optimal possible circumstances, which is great for modeling, but it's not great as far as like what do a lot of people do when they don't go to school from 18 to 21? They say they're figuring it out and go work at McDonald's, like, or maybe it's not McDonald's. Maybe they're working at a warehouse job or like something else where it's like they're just not getting paid a lot. It's not that this is inherently wrong. Sometimes you need time to figure out life, but it's like the superiority of it is like doesn't always work out great. I guess bringing it back to what's relevant, if you're going to do the measuring return on investment of education, you need to incorporate opportunity cost of what decisions you would have been making otherwise, good or bad. What would have been happening as far as your investments throughout that period? I mean, would you have actually been optimal with them? And three, some of it's also like lifestyle-wise, meaning some people can't do certain types of jobs for extended periods. Like if you're a construction worker, I mean, your knees and back might be shot by the time you're 50. If you can't work for another 15 years, that can be tough as well. I mean, there's just a lot that makes it hard to measure, but just keeping in mind all the different parts of it can help. Let's see, what other questions would I like to answer? What advice would you give someone considering investing in their own education? I think the big thing that I would consider is, how is this going to impact where I would like to go with either career or business? How much does it cost relative to other educational options that might give me something similar? And am I realistically actually going to do all of the work necessary in order to actually get this to work properly? Meaning, don't sign up for a certification and then drop out. That's nonsense. Don't go to school and then drop out. Nonsense. If you know all of that information, then just going in there and trying to get through it really helps. And to be realistic, like, trying to get something out of it, good. But sometimes, like, going to school or working on, like, educational stuff while you're working full time, sometimes it's okay to just get the certification and just get through it. Not getting any perfect marks, not getting everything absolutely nailed perfectly in your brain. Like, just do what it takes to pass. Sometimes that is perfectly fine. Most of the time, what does that mean? Show up, do the work, do the hours you know you need. Do that and it can really help. If someone has limited resources, where should they start investing in their education? There is an obnoxious amount of free stuff out there. YouTube is a great place to start, but Reddit can be helpful for finding resources. Another thing is just, if you don't have good fundamentals in terms of reading, I would probably start with like a library application that gets you access to a wide variety of libraries. Find somewhere to get free PDFs of books somewhere, or just find them in your local library. I think that's pretty much all I got as far as like going over education. This is a nice kind of thing to start off, but if you guys have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments, and other than that,